After the incident, HOA demanded my records without a warrant, didn't know I teach constitutional law. The letter was printed on cheap HOA letterhead, but it read like something out of a bad crime show. You are hereby required, it said, to provide all camera footage, communications, schedules, and any employment or medical records relevant to the incident of May 14th. Failure to comply may result in fines, loss of amenity access, and legal action. No warrant, no subpoena, just my homeowners association pretending it was a branch of law enforcement. I remember standing at my kitchen counter in Reston, Virginia, still in my navy blazer from class, highlighter in hand. I went through the letter line by line, marking every overreach in neon yellow. Doorbell camera footage, my emails, my calendar, even employment verification. For a noise complaint that a 25-year-old tech bro named Todd had turned into a federal case. They thought I would panic, hand everything over, beg. Instead, I opened my laptop, created a folder called HOA, Incident, and started a timeline. If they wanted to play government, they were about to learn what due process actually looks like. By the way, if you've ever had an HOA try to act like the police, you'll want to hear how this ends. So go ahead and subscribe now because this one escalates fast. And the part where their own lawyer panics? You don't want to miss that. What the board didn't know yet was that I spend my days teaching constitutional law. And I was already 3 steps ahead. I didn't move to Reston to pick a fight with a homeowners association. I moved there for quiet. I'm a constitutional law professor at a university just outside D.C. My days are spent talking about due process, unreasonable searches, separation of powers. At night, I want to hear nothing but my kettle whistling, and, if I'm lucky, the faint hum of someone's TV through a shared wall. 2 years before that letter showed up, I'd fallen in love with this little row of brick townhomes. Tree-lined sidewalks, kids on scooters, dog walkers who waved, and a pond you could circle in 15 minutes between grading exams. My unit was end of row, small fenced patio, 1 assigned parking space, 1 guest space. Boring in the best possible way. My reputation in the neighborhood matched the house, quiet and predictable. I'm the woman who brings a casserole when someone has a baby, who returns Amazon packages that land at the wrong door, who reminds everyone about daylight savings in the Facebook group. I read the CC and RS before closing, printed them, tabbed them, and then basically never needed them again. The HOA itself, at first, felt like background noise. Dues auto-drafted, occasional emails about trash cans and pool hours. A board president named Linda who liked flower beds a little too much, but nothing sinister. They organized a fall festival. They sent a stern note about Halloween decorations. It was suburban theater, and I watched from my porch with a book in my lap. Then Todd moved in across the parking lot. He arrived in a matte black Tesla, blasting music with the windows down, wearing a white tank top and black Adidas shorts, fanny pack slung crossbody like tactical gear. Tall, gym-built, wireless earbuds in like permanent accessories. He was on the phone, loud, telling someone, yeah, it's like a starter investment property. HOA's chill. I'll have this place turned around in a year. Within a week, he'd installed smart bulbs that cycled neon colors all night and started treating the guest parking like his personal garage. Packages piled at his door. Gaming chairs, multiple monitors, a squat rack he somehow wedged into the second bedroom. When he walked past you, he'd give a curt nod that said less neighbor and more, I own this block. I tried to give him the benefit of the doubt. 25, fresh money, probably just never lived anywhere with thin walls and shared driveways. I've taught enough undergrads to know a little structure goes a long way. The HOA seemed enchanted. Overnight, Todd was on the social committee. He suggested upgrading the community tech stack, at a board meeting, and suddenly we had a new online violations portal and cameras at the pool. He called them quality of life improvements. I called them evidence factories, but only in my head. For a while, the changes were just mildly annoying. More emails, more alerts, a notice about trash cans sent to the entire community because one person left theirs out an extra day. Neighbors started whispering about snitch culture, but no one wanted to be the one to confront the enthusiastic new guy. And for a while, it looked like my little cul-de-sac might ride out the tech bro storm. I taught my classes, graded my exams, walked my route around the pond. I nodded at Todd. He nodded back, earbuds still in. We existed in parallel until the night he decided our quiet community needed drama. At the time, I thought it would be a simple, neighborly misunderstanding. I had no idea that one overinflated ego and one overeager HOA board were about to turn my driveway into a case study in abuse of authority. And I had no idea yet that the incident they were about to fabricate would end with my name in an internal HOA report, as if I were some kind of suspect in my own neighborhood. The night everything started was, on paper, completely ordinary. It was a Tuesday in May, the end of the semester. I just finished grading my last batch of exams and was celebrating with a glass of wine and a documentary about the Warrant court. Around 10 p.m., through my closed windows, bass started pulsing like a minor earthquake. At first, I thought a car had pulled up outside. Then the bass didn't move. It got louder. I stepped onto my little patio. Todd's blinds were glowing nightclub blue. His upstairs windows strobed purple. Laughter and music spilled out, the kind with lyrics that don't belong at full volume on a work night with kids next door. Fine. New neighbor. Maybe a one-off. I gave it 20 minutes. By 10:30, my picture frames were rattling. I slipped on flats, grabbed a light cardigan, and walked across the parking lot. His front door was half open for airflow, and I could see at least 8 people inside, drinks in hand, clustered around an enormous TV looping some crypto chart. I knocked, firmly but not aggressively. Todd turned, eyebrows raised, AirPods in. He popped one out like he was answering a customer support call. Yeah. Hey, I said, smiling politely. Sorry to interrupt. I'm Eleanor, from over there. I pointed to my unit. The walls carry more than you'd think. Any chance you could turn it down a notch? I've got early classes, and there are kids on this row. He gave me a slow once-over, taking in my cardigan, my glasses, my bare feet in flats. Then he smirked. Right, he said, loud enough for his friends to hear. HOA police. A couple of them snickered. It's 10:30, not 3 a.m. We're fine. I'm not with the HOA. I said evenly, I'm your neighbor, and the rules do say quiet hours start at 10. He lifted his phone and, without so much as asking, angled it toward me, camera up. Can you repeat that? I blinked. I'm not interested in being recorded. Thanks. He rolled his eyes theatrically, still filming. This is what I mean about these communities, he told his phone. You pay $600,000 for a townhouse, and some Karen thinks she runs the block. Turn the music down, Todd, I said, my voice losing its warmth. Please. He stepped closer, lowering his voice, so only I could hear, phone still between us. Or what? For a split second, my stomach dipped, not from fear of him, but from the realization that he enjoyed this. The provocation, the performance. I'll email the board in the morning. I said, good night. I turned and walked back across the lot, feeling his camera on my back. By the time I woke up at 6, the music was long gone, the patio was litter-free, and for a moment I wondered if I'd overreacted. Then I checked my email. Subject line, urgent, incident report, harassment/disturbance, Unit 14B. For minutes after I'd gone to bed, Todd had submitted a complaint through the new violations portal. Attached, a 23-second video clip. The thumbnail was my face in the doorway, mid-sentence, eyes half closed. In his narrative, I hadn't asked. I had stormed over, banged on the door repeatedly, and threatened further action while aggressively invading his personal space. He checked every escalation box available: safety concern, harassment, hostile environment. Below, in a reply sent at 1:12 a.m., Linda, our HOA president, had written, "Thank you, Todd. This is very concerning. We will treat this as a priority matter." No one had asked for my version. An hour later, another email landed. Per Section 4, 3, Community Conduct. It began, "The board has opened a file regarding an incident involving you on May 14th. It requested a written response to the allegations within 48 hours. 48 hours. No details of the allegations. No copy of the full video. No mention of a hearing. Just a quiet note that a file now existed with my name on it. At the bottom, in small font, failure to cooperate may result in sanctions as outlined in the governing documents." I stared at the screen, feeling my cheeks heat, not with shame, but with something colder. It wasn't the noise. It wasn't even the lie. It was the fact that without a single conversation, my own HOA had slotted me into the role of potential offender. That morning, I still thought it was just a neighbor being dramatic and a board eager to appease a loud new member. I had no idea it was only their opening move. If you've ever had someone twist a situation against you, hit the like button, because what Todd did next made that 23-second video look tame. That day, I assumed it was a one-off annoyance. I had no idea it was just the first test. The social fallout didn't take long. By lunchtime the next day, the neighborhood Facebook group, which usually argued about mulch colors, had a new post from Linda. "Reminder, our community is a safe space. Harassment and intimidation of neighbors will not be tolerated. If you experience threatening behavior, please report it through the violations portal so the board can act swiftly." No names, no details, but the timing wasn't subtle. Underneath, the comments bloomed. "So sorry someone's dealing with that. People need to remember we're not in a dorm. Some folks just don't belong in HOAs if they can't follow rules." I scrolled, my coffee going cold. A few minutes later, a new comment popped up from Todd himself. "Appreciate the board taking this seriously. Didn't expect to deal with this kind of aggression in a supposedly professional community." Professional. I almost laughed. I was literally wearing a blazer while reading it. By that evening, the shift was obvious. The couple 2 doors down, who usually chatted about their toddler's milestones, gave me a thin smile and ducked inside. A retiree I'd walked with around the pond suddenly had a doctor's appointment when I waved my leash and asked if she wanted to join. I wasn't paranoid. I teach pattern recognition for a living. The pattern was isolation. 2 days later, an envelope appeared on my door. Not a violation notice. Worse. Courtesy reminder. It said at the top, in cheery font, "Dear resident, we've received concerns regarding elevated noise and confrontational behavior originating from your unit. As a reminder, Section 4. 3 of the community rules requires that residents maintain a courteous demeanor and avoid any conduct that could create a hostile environment. Please be mindful of your interactions with neighbors. Future incidents may result in formal action by the board. Warm regards, the board." Warm regards. They'd managed to say, without saying that I was a problem. To every board member who read that, to the property manager who hit print, my name was now next to hostile. A week later, the paper notes started. One appeared on my windshield. "Please remember to park within the lines. Others are watching." My tires were perfectly centered. Another was taped to my front door. Multiple residents have commented on late-night arguments near your unit. This is a quiet community. No signature. Just that strange, floating multiple residents, like a jury I never saw. I stood there, thumb pressing into the tape, feeling my jaw tighten. I don't yell. I hadn't raised my voice once that night at Todd's. But somehow, in the whispered retelling, I'd become the woman who causes scenes in the parking lot. At the next trash day, as I wheeled my bin out, I caught snippets behind me. Yeah, that's her. Poor guy just moved in. Board's already on it. I turned. Two neighbors quickly pretended to fuss with their recycling. Over their shoulder, I saw Todd, tank top and headphones, as always, laughing into his phone on his porch. When our eyes met, he gave me a little two-finger salute, mock military, and smirked. He was enjoying this. The thing about reputational warfare is that it rarely announces itself. It's in the pause before a greeting, the way meetings are forgotten to be mentioned, the subtle repositioning of who is considered reasonable and who is dramatic. As the weeks went by, the HOA's emails picked up a new tone, always vague, always plural. Reminder to all residents, confrontations should be avoided. Please remember to use respectful language when addressing neighbors and board members. They never named me. They didn't have to. The implication did the work. I stopped getting invited to impromptu wine nights on the cul-de-sac. The community book club thread went quiet on my end. A neighbor I'd helped when her car wouldn't start now waved from a careful distance, as if proximity alone might drag her into whatever file the board had opened. What the board hadn't realized, though, was that every vague warning, every sticky note, every chilly glance was going exactly where it belonged, into the folder on my desktop labeled HOA Incident, and into a matching hard copy binder on my shelf. Because if there's one thing I teach my students, it's this: before you argue about rights, you document the pattern. They thought they were quietly turning the community against me, but the HOA still hadn't noticed that every whisper, every courtesy reminder, every Facebook post was becoming Exhibit A in a case they didn't even know I was building. The shift from whispers to open aggression came 3 weeks later, in the form of that ridiculous letter on flimsy HOA letterhead. By then, the courtesy reminders and Facebook subtweets had done their work. I was the supposed problem child of a very boring townhouse community. I'd answered their vague emails politely, always asking, "Could you please specify the alleged conduct and date?" They never did. They just kept hinting. Then on a Friday afternoon, after I dismissed my last class, an email from the management company pinged my phone. Formal request for records, incident of May 14th. A hard copy, it said, was also being delivered to my door. I opened the PDF on the train. You are hereby required to provide all camera footage, communications, schedules, and any employment or medical records relevant to the incident of May 14th. Failure to comply may result in fines, loss of amenity access, and legal action. They wanted my doorbell footage, my emails, my calendar, employment verification from my university, and, astonishingly, any medical or psychological records that might contextualize the events in question. For a noise complaint, by the time I walked into my kitchen in Reston, blazer still on, the paper copy was waiting on the counter where the courier had slid it through the mail slot. Same language, same faux prosecutorial tone. No subpoena, no warrant, no citation to any section of the CC and RS that might conceivably justify this fishing expedition. Just the HOA playing dress-up as a government agency. There was a new attachment, too, a notice of non-cooperation. It said that my ongoing refusal to engage constructively with the board's investigation was itself a violation that could lead to escalated enforcement measures. What ongoing refusal? I'd responded to every email. I just hadn't accepted their premise that I was guilty of something undefined. 2 hours later, as I took my trash out, Todd strolled past in his white tank top and Adidas shorts, earbuds in, grinning like a man who'd just won a bet. "Hey, Professor," he called over the bass, leaking from his headphones. "Boards send you their little questionnaire." I paused, trash bag in hand. "They sent me an unlawful demand for my private records." I said calmly. He scoffed. "Unlawful? It's the HOA. You signed up for this when you bought in. They can do whatever they need to keep things safe." He even did air quotes. "Safe and convenient for you aren't the same thing," I said. "And no, Todd, they can't." He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "If you've got nothing to hide, why are you nervous?" I looked at him for a long second. This is the core tactic of every bully I've ever studied. Manufacture an accusation, then frame any resistance as proof of guilt. "I'm not nervous," I said. "I'm documenting." He rolled his eyes, turned his music up, and walked away, tossing over his shoulder, "Good luck when they shut off your pool key." That night, a new email landed from Linda herself. "The board unanimously expects your full cooperation in this matter. Failure to provide the requested materials will be treated as an admission that you are not acting in good faith." There it was, not even pretending anymore. Comply, or we'll brand you uncooperative and start punishing you. I sat at my kitchen table, letter in one hand, highlighter in the other, marking every phrase that overreached, hereby required, legal action, non-cooperation, medical records. Every time they tried to sound like a court order, they dug themselves deeper into a hole labeled abuse of authority. Up to that point, I'd hoped this would fizzle out as soon as they realized Todd was dramatizing. That letter made something very clear. They weren't backing down. They were escalating from social pressure to concrete threats, money, access, reputation, based on a story I still hadn't even been allowed to see in full. That was the moment I understood. If I didn't push back the right way, they'd use this blueprint on the next quiet neighbor who annoyed them. And if you've ever had someone wave rules in your face to scare you into silence, drop a comment, because from here on, I stopped treating this like a misunderstanding. I treated it like a case. I've spent 20 years telling students that rights only matter if you assert them. Staring at that letter, highlighter hovering over, "You are hereby required," I realized it was time to practice what I preach. Up to that moment, I'd been reacting, answering their vague emails, explaining myself as if the burden was on me. That letter flipped a switch. I set the highlighter down, pulled my laptop closer, and opened a blank document. Title: Response to Unlawful HOA Demand. My pulse slowed. This was familiar territory, like prepping a lecture, except the audience was an overreaching board instead of a room of drowsy 1LS. First line I typed, "Dear board members and management, I write in response to your formal request for records dated May 20th. No emotion, just facts. Next, please identify the specific provision in the recorded declaration, bylaws, or rules and regulations that authorizes the association to compel a homeowner to produce private camera footage, personal correspondence, employment documentation, or medical/psychological records, absent a subpoena, court order, or law enforcement request supported by probable cause." I paused, then added a new recipient, the generic legal address for the management company that I dug up from a previous dispute over parking, plus the outside counsel listed on an old newsletter. If they wanted to sound like a court, fine. I'd treat this like discovery. I kept going. As you are undoubtedly aware, the association is not a law enforcement agency. If you sincerely believe a crime occurred on May 14th, I encourage you to contact the appropriate authorities. I will, of course, fully cooperate with any lawful investigation conducted pursuant to valid legal process. I could almost hear a couple of my colleagues cheering. then I shifted the burden where it belonged. Until such time, I declined to provide private records beyond what is contemplated in the governing documents. However, pursuant to my rights as a member, I hereby request copies of 1. The complete, unedited complaint and any attachments submitted by Todd, last name, regarding the alleged incident. 2. Any internal emails, notes, or incident reports generated by board members or management concerning my name or unit number since May 14th. 3. The written procedures, if any, that govern the board's handling of homeowner complaints, including notice and opportunity to be heard. Please consider this a formal records request under Virginia law. I'm happy to pay reasonable copying costs. I read it twice, trimming any excess edge. No threats, no legal jargon for show, just precise questions that, if answered honestly, would expose how far they'd wandered off the map. Then I addressed the most offensive part, line by line. Your demand for any medical or psychological records that might contextualize the events in question is particularly troubling. Please explain what authority you believe permits the association to solicit protected health information from a homeowner and what safeguards, if any, you have in place to prevent misuse or disclosure. I trust your legal counsel will advise you on the risk this language creates for the association. I ended simply, until I receive clear citation to valid authority, I will not be producing the requested materials. I remain willing to provide a written account of my experience on May 14th in any fair process that affords me access to the full complaint and evidence. Sincerely, Eleanor Hayes. Before I hit send, I did one more thing. I switched over to my HOA incident folder and dragged in scans of the letter, screenshots of every vague email, photos of the windshield notes, and the logs from my own doorbell camera showing exactly how calm that night had been. Then I clicked send and, in the silence afterward, felt something unclench in my chest. In that moment, I stopped being their quiet, isolated target. I stopped reacting, and I started planning like what I actually am. Someone who has spent years studying exactly how badly things go for petty authorities who forget there are limits to their power. The first sign my email had landed was the silence. Usually, the management company responded within a day with some canned, "Thank you for your feedback." This time, nothing. No auto-reply, no follow-up courtesy reminder. Just 3 days of digital crickets. So I did what I tell my students to do. When power gets quiet, I started building the record myself. I opened my HOA incident folder and created a subfolder, Discovery. In it, I dropped a fresh document titled Timeline May 14th Incident, date and time in one column, incident in the next, evidence in the third. May 14th, 10:22 p.m. Doorbell camera captures me leaving my unit. Calm posture, cardigan, flats. No raised voice. 10:24 p.m. Front door camera shows me at Todd's. Knocking once, speaking for under a minute. The mic caught my exact words. "Hey, I'm your neighbor. Could you turn it down a notch?" No threats. No storming. 10:26 p.m. Same camera, me walking away. No shouting, no second knock. A few muffled laughs from inside. Then the door closing. 10:31 p.m. Email notification from the violations portal. Todd submitting his harassment complaint. I exported the doorbell footage, saved screenshots, and wrote clean, neutral descriptions under each clip. If this ever wound up in front of a neutral decision maker, I wanted them to be able to follow the story without adjectives. Next, I printed every courtesy reminder and vague email highlighting phrases like hostile environment and non-cooperation. On a legal pad, I started a separate list titled Unsupported Assertions, then jotted multiple residents, ongoing refusal, escalated enforcement measures. No names, no dates, no citations, Then I turned outward. If the board wasn't going to show me their file voluntarily, Virginia law would. I pulled up the state statutes I'd bookmarked years ago for a seminar on common interest communities. I wasn't looking to sue. I was looking for leverage. Sure enough, there it was. The provision giving homeowners the right to inspect association records, complaints, reports, minutes within a reasonable time after a written request. I drafted a second letter, this one shorter but sharper, citing the exact code section and requesting an appointment to inspect all records, including but not limited to complaints, internal communications, and incident reports referring to my name or unit number from May 14th onward. This time, I didn't just email it. I printed 2 copies, slid one under the management office door during my lunch break, and sent the other certified mail. Return receipt requested. Bureaucracy can be a weapon. You just have to swing it slowly. Back home, I started quietly corroborating my own account. I knocked on the door of the couple with the toddler 2 doors down. When the husband opened it, he looked like he expected a confrontation. I smiled. "Hey, sorry to bother you. Quick question. Were you awake on the night of May 14th around 10:30? He relaxed a fraction. "Yeah, our kid's sleep regression doesn't care about quiet hours." "Why?" "Did you hear any shouting from my direction or an argument outside?" I asked, keeping my tone neutral. He frowned, thinking. "No, we heard bass from over there." He jerked his head toward Todd's. "But that's it." "Why?" "Just trying to get my facts straight," I said. "Would you be willing to put that in writing if the board asks?" He hesitated, then nodded. "Sure. I don't want drama, but I also don't like people getting railroaded." I thanked him and made a note. Witness 1, no argument heard. Confirms music volume. Later that week, I caught the retiree from my walking loop bringing in her mail. "Can I ask you something as a neighbor, and not as whatever rumor you've heard?" I said. She chuckled softly. I figured there was more to it than Facebook hints. I asked the same questions. She gave the same answers. No yelling, just music. And you've always been the calmest one on this street. Another note. Another potential statement. Meanwhile, the HOA's digital footprint kept growing. Todd couldn't help himself. On the Facebook group, he replied to Linda's vague harassment post with more details than he realized he was sharing. She came pounding on my door twice, got in my face, said she'd make sure the board dealt with me. I felt unsafe in my own home. Twice, he claimed. My doorbell video showed one brief visit. Felt unsafe. The footage showed him stepping toward me, phone up, not backing away. I took screenshots of every exaggerated comment he left, time-stamped, and saved. People like Todd think the internet is a stage. For me, it was a transcript. A week after my records request letter, the management company finally broke their silence. "Dear Ms. Hayes, we have received your correspondence. The board will review your request for inspection of association records at its next scheduled meeting. In the meantime, please be reminded that the board expects your full cooperation with its investigation." No mention of legal authority. No answer to my questions. But buried in the middle was a sentence that made me smile. "We have forwarded your concerns regarding privacy and legal process to Association Counsel for review." Good, I thought. Let someone with malpractice insurance read the phrase medical or psychological records and decide how much they want to own it. I printed that email, too, and added it to the binder. Day by day, the stack grew. Emails, notes, statutes, neighbor comments, video logs. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't loud. But it was methodical. Because at that point, there was only one piece missing from the file. I was assembling the moment when the board, or Todd, would go just a little too far on the record. All I had to do was give them the perfect opportunity to step directly into their own trap. And if you're still here because you've been on the wrong end of HOA power games, make sure you're subscribed. The way they took that bait is exactly why you always document first. Now, I had my evidence. I just needed the stage. When the email finally came announcing a special executive session, incident of May 14th, I knew I had my stage. Closed meeting of the board. It said, purpose, to discuss enforcement options related to ongoing conduct concerns involving Unit 12C. That was me. They added, almost as an afterthought, homeowner may attend for the first portion to provide information. Perfect. I printed the notice, slid it into my binder, and spent the next evening doing what Todd would never expect from the Karen professor across the lot, rehearsing questions, not speeches. If they wanted to treat this like a quasi-trial, I'd give them one on the record. First, I wrote a short, deliberately bland reply. Thank you for the notice. I will attend. Please confirm whether this session will be recorded and what procedures will govern homeowner participation. They answered the next day. No recording, standard procedures, whatever that meant. Translation, they wanted a he said/she said. They could summarize however they liked. So I created my own record. The night before the meeting, I set my phone on the kitchen table and opened the voice memos app. Prep, HOA special session. I said aloud, then walked through my plan. Start calm. Ask what rule they think I've violated. Ask what authority they think allows them to demand private records. Ask whether counsel had reviewed that language. Not to argue, just to make them answer in full sentences, in front of each other with Todd watching. On a legal pad, I drew 3 columns. Question, likely board answer. Follow up. Underneath, in big block letters, I wrote, stay Professor CLM. Let them talk. The last piece of bait came in a separate email from Linda, time-stamped 10:47 p.m. Like she just thought of one more way to flex. Eleanor, please remember to bring any and all records you intend to rely on, including doorbell footage, emails, and personal notes. Failure to produce them may affect the board's view of your cooperation and credibility. There it was, their assumption baked right into the sentence, that my evidence existed for their inspection, on demand. I stared at the line, affect the board's view of your cooperation and credibility, and smiled. Then I drafted my answer. Linda, I will gladly describe my experience and answer relevant questions. I will not be turning over private electronic records without lawful authority, as noted in my prior correspondence. If the association believes a crime occurred, I encourage you to contact law enforcement. Best, Eleanor. I hit send, then printed both her email and my reply for the binder. By the time the meeting day rolled around, my HOA incident folder wasn't just a collection of annoyances. It was a structured case file. Timeline, statutes, neighbor statements, screenshots of Todd's embellished Facebook comments, and quietly sitting on a flash drive in my bag, the unedited doorbell footage that proved he'd lied about me pounding and threatening. I had no intention of handing that drive over. Not yet. First, I needed Todd and the board to double down. On the record, in the same room, in front of their own counsel, on their fantasy that they could demand anything they wanted from a homeowner, no warrant, no subpoena, no due process. Because once they did that, the doorbell video wouldn't just clear my name. It would make their entire investigation look exactly like what it was, harassment dressed up in legalese. So when I buttoned my navy blazer, slid the binder into my structured bag, and walked toward the community center that evening, it wasn't to beg for my reputation back. It was to quietly lay out the rope. All I needed was for them, and especially Todd, to tug on it just a little harder. The special session was in the tiny community center off the parking lot, the kind of room usually reserved for birthday parties and mediocre holiday potlucks. That night, they tried to make it look official. Long folding table, at the front, pitchers of water, little nameplates. Linda sat in the middle, floral blouse and tight smile. On one side, two other board members. On the other, the community manager, laptop open. At the far end sat a man in a navy suit with a legal pad, association counsel. Todd lounged in a chair against the wall, arms crossed over his tank top, earbuds dangling, like he was there to watch the show he'd produced. Eleanor, thanks for coming, Linda began, voice dripping manufactured warmth. We're here to address ongoing conduct concerns. Before we discuss enforcement, we'd like to give you the opportunity to cooperate by providing the records we requested. There it was, straight to records. No pretense. I set my structured bag by the chair, placed my binder on the table, and folded my hands. Before we talk about cooperation, I'd like to understand the authority for your demand, I said. What specific provision in the declaration or bylaws empowers the association to compel a homeowner to turn over private camera footage, emails, employment information, and medical records? The room shifted. One board member glanced at the lawyer. The lawyer didn't look up from his pad. Linda frowned. We're just trying to investigate a serious incident. You agreed to abide by the rules when you bought here. The board can request any information it needs to keep the community safe. Where is that written? I asked, calm. Which section? Silence. The community manager started scrolling frantically. Todd snorted. This is exactly what I mean, he said, gesturing at me. She thinks she's above the rules. She came pounding on my door, twice got inches from my face, said she'd make sure the board dealt with me. I sent you the video. She's clearly unstable. Why else won't she hand over her psych records? He just said it, out loud. Psych records. I watched the lawyer's pen pause mid-stroke. I turned to him. Counsel, has the association adopted any policy about soliciting homeowners' medical or psychological information? He finally looked up. The phrasing in that letter was unfortunate. He said carefully, the board is simply seeking context. So you're confirming, I said, that the HOA believes it can demand protected health information from a homeowner with the threat of fines and loss of amenities without a subpoena or court order? I didn't say that, he replied quickly. The association is not a law enforcement agency. Agreed, I said, yet your letter reads like one. It says I am hereby required to provide private data. There is no citation to the governing documents, no reference to Virginia law. You threaten legal action, while bypassing the only legal processes that would make such a demand permissible. Do you see the problem? One board member cleared his throat. We just assumed owners have to cooperate. Cooperate with what exactly? I asked. You've opened a file on me without ever providing the complete complaint. You've issued courtesy reminders hinting at harassment and hostility. You've circulated vague warnings on Facebook that lined up precisely with a neighbor's embellished story. And then you escalated to demanding my private records on pain of punishment. Linda's smile flattened. We have multiple reports that you created a hostile environment, she said, including video. I slid a single piece of paper from my binder and set it in front of me. Let's talk about that video. I said, Todd, in your written complaint through the portal, you stated I pounded on the door repeatedly, yelled, and threatened further action. Correct? He shrugged. Pretty much, yeah. And in the Facebook group, I continued, you added that I came back twice and that there was an argument outside that made you feel unsafe. Yeah, he said. Everyone saw it. You can't walk that back now. I reached into my bag and placed a small USB drive on the table, but kept my fingers on it. My doorbell camera records audio and video, I said, from my door, aimed across the parking lot. It captured my walk to your unit, my knock, our entire conversation, and my walk back. One visit, one knock, no yelling, no threats. 43 seconds total. Todd shifted. You're not allowed to record me without. In Virginia, I said, not looking at him, one-party consent applies. More importantly, you recorded me without consent and sent that to the board, correct? Linda jumped in. We're not here to debate. We are absolutely here to clarify facts. I said, still level, because your entire investigation rests on a version of events that this video disproves. I'm not handing over this drive to be kept in some mystery file, but I am willing to play it right now on that laptop if counsel agrees to correct the record. All eyes went to the lawyer. He exhaled slowly. From a liability standpoint, he said to the board, if there is exculpatory evidence, you want to see it. The manager plugged in the drive. My heart didn't race. I'd watched this clip enough times to know every frame. On screen, there I was, cardigan, flats, normal walking pace. A single polite knock. My voice, calm. Hey, I'm your neighbor from across the lot. The walls are thin. Could you turn it down a notch? No pounding. No yelling. No threats. Then Todd's voice, HOA police. Laughter behind him. My reply, I'm not with the HOA. I'm your neighbor. Quiet hours start at 10. His phone angled up. Can you repeat that? My refusal to be recorded. His muttered, Karen thinks she runs the block. Then me, turn the music down, Todd. Please. I turned, walked away. Door closed. Clip ended. The room was so quiet I could hear the HVAC kick on. I looked at the board. That, I said, is the incident you open a file over. That is what you use to justify warning letters, social media innuendo, and a demand for my personal records. Do any of you see conduct here that authorizes sanctions under Section 4? 3. One board member shook his head before catching himself. Linda's cheeks had gone pink. I turned back to counsel. You mentioned liability. I said, you now have direct knowledge that a board-favored homeowner submitted a materially false complaint and that the board amplified it without giving the accused homeowner access to the evidence or a meaningful opportunity to respond. And you have a written demand on your letterhead overreaching into private data under threat of punishment. How comfortable are you with that paper trail if this escalates beyond this room? He sat back, lips pressed thin. I'm going to recommend, he said slowly, that the board immediately withdraw the prior records request, cease any enforcement action related to this alleged incident, and review its complaint handling procedures, and that any future requests for homeowner records be vetted by counsel before going out. Todd straightened. Wait, what? She's the one harassing. Mr. Last name. The lawyer cut in. You may also want to consider the consequences of filing knowingly false complaints that expose the association to risk. For the first time since he moved in, Todd didn't have a smirk ready. Linda cleared her throat. Well, in light of this new information, she said, avoiding my eyes, the board will close the file on Unit 12C and issue a clarification that no violation was found. No, I said gently, you won't clarify that you found nothing. You will state that upon review of complete evidence, the board determined the complaint was unfounded and that your prior communications were in error. And you will put that in writing. The lawyer nodded once. That would be prudent. I closed my binder. You wanted my records. I said quietly, what you got was a lesson in due process and limits on your authority. If you treated this like a neighbor dispute from the start, we wouldn't be here. They thought humiliating me in a closed session would end the story, but exposing them in that tiny community room was just the beginning, because what came next hit them where they care most, their power, their policies, and their precious control over everyone else's lives. And if you've ever watched an HOA realize in real time that they picked the wrong person to bully, tell me in the comments how they tried it with you, because the aftermath of this meeting was brutal for the board. Walking out of that room, I could already feel the narrative tilting. But the real consequences didn't show up until the emails started landing. The next morning at 9:02 a.m., I got a message from the management company marked Urgent Board Action. I opened it and smiled before I finished the first paragraph. Dear Ms. Hayes, at the recommendation of Association Counsel, the board hereby withdraws its prior formal request for records dated May 20th. The association acknowledges that certain language in that letter was inappropriate and did not accurately reflect the board's authority under the governing documents or applicable law. There it was in black and white, not just a quiet delete, but an admission that they'd overstepped. The next paragraph was even better. Following review of additional evidence presented at the June 3rd executive session, the board has determined that the complaint regarding your alleged conduct on May 14th was unfounded. Any prior communications suggesting otherwise should be disregarded. Unfounded. Disregarded. Those are not words HOAs like to put in writing. 2 hours later, Linda posted in the Facebook group, Board update. After completing our review, we have closed the matter related to the reported incident on May 14th. We remind all residents that complaints must be accurate and made in good faith. The board will be revisiting its procedures to ensure fairness and privacy protections for everyone. No apology, no name, but people can read subtext. Screenshots started trickling into my inbox from the few neighbors who still trusted me. Wow, so it was overblown. Glad they finally admitted it. Honestly, that letter they sent you was terrifying. We were worried what they'd demand next. That afternoon, a separate email went to all homeowners. Subject: New policy, requests for owner records and complaint procedures. I opened it like it was a present. Effective immediately, it read, the association will not request or retain any medical or psychological information from homeowners. Any request for personal records, including security footage, emails, or employment verification, must be reviewed by Association Counsel and accompanied by a citation to the specific authority permitting the request. Homeowners retain the right to decline without prejudice absent lawful process. They didn't say, because we scared the constitutional law professor, but they didn't have to. That policy existed because I'd refused to flinch. Buried in the same email was a quiet little grenade. The board is also reviewing prior complaints to ensure they were made in good faith. Submitting materially false information may result in enforcement action. Translation: Todd, congratulations. You've just volunteered to be Exhibit A in a new internal review. Over the next week, the social map of the neighborhood redrew itself. The couple with the toddler stopped avoiding eye contact and knocked on my door with banana bread just because. The retiree from my walking loop linked her arm through mine one evening and said, for what it's worth, I saw your video. They should have been embarrassed. Even the most HOA-loyal neighbor pulled me aside by the mailboxes. I thought they could just ask for anything, she said softly. I didn't know we could say no. That's the point. I told her, you're not living in a surveillance state. You're paying dues to maintain landscaping. And Todd, the volume on his life turned down noticeably. The neon lights in his windows went dark by 10. The party stopped. The Facebook hot takes dried up. He still strutted to his Tesla in that white tank top, but now, when he passed the community center, he glanced at the bulletin board where a new notice was pinned. Reminder: falsifying or exaggerating complaints can subject a homeowner to enforcement action under Section 4. 3. All complaints must be made in good faith. I didn't write that notice. I didn't have to. A month later, I saw him at the pond, pacing on a call. Yeah, HOA here's nuts, he was saying. They're auditing my complaints now. I'm over it. I'll probably just rent the place out and move downtown. For the board, the fallout went deeper than one bad night. Council required them to adopt a written complaint handling procedure. No more secret files, mandatory sharing of evidence with the accused, clear notice of alleged violations, documented hearings. Every vague, courtesy reminder now had to tie back to an actual rule. It wasn't dramatic. It was bureaucratic. And that's what made it powerful. The same machinery they tried to weaponize against me, letters, portals, policies, had been turned inward. Every overreach I'd highlighted was now a line in a new manual labeled, "Don't do this again." And if you've ever wished your HOA would get a reality check like that, hit the like button, because this part, watching them rewrite their own rules because you refuse to be bullied, that's the quietest, sweetest win of all. From that point on, they still had meetings. They still sent emails about trash cans. But they never again used the words, "You are hereby required," without a lawyer's hand shaking over the keyboard. And in every future dispute, in the back of their minds, there was one inconvenient precedent. The day they demanded my records without a warrant and got a crash course in constitutional limits instead. In the weeks after the policy email went out, the neighborhood finally started sounding like what I'd moved there for in the first place: boring. Kids on scooters argued about whose turn it was on the cul-de-sac, not about whose mom had an incident file. The loudest thing at night was the cicadas by the pond, not Todd's base. For the first time in months, my doorbell alerts were just Amazon packages and the occasional Girl Scout. But the real change was invisible unless you knew where to look. At the next annual meeting, I sat in the back with my notebook while Linda read through a new agenda item, complaint handling and privacy policy. She didn't meet my eyes when she said it, but the lawyer was there again. And this time his presence felt less like a weapon and more like a leash. He walked the room, through it in plain English. No more secret files. Every accused owner gets a copy of the complaint and evidence. No more fishing expeditions into personal data. No more letters that sound like court orders. If the board thinks something is criminal, they call the police like everyone else. A hand went up in the second row. "So you can't just demand our ring footage anymore?" a dad asked. "Correct," counsel said. "You can choose to share it, but the association can't compel it without lawful authority." Murmurs. Heads turned. A few people glanced back at me. I just kept my face neutral and wrote one word in my notebook: precedent. Todd didn't stay long after that. He tried to bluster it out for a while, complaining about paranoid HOAs on his calls, dropping hints about moving to a high-rise where professionals live. But when the board quietly audited his past complaints and sent him a written warning about exaggerations, the fun drained out of the game. The neon bulbs disappeared. The parties got smaller, then stopped. One weekend in late August, a moving truck backed up to his unit. I watched from my kitchen window as he loaded gaming chairs and monitors, tank top clinging in the humidity. When he carried out the squat rack, he caught sight of me through the glass. For once, there was no smirk, just a flicker of recognition that this hadn't gone the way he'd scripted. He lifted a hand in a half shrug, half wave. I nodded once and went back to my kettle. Life in the HOA didn't transform into some utopia overnight. There were still emails about trash cans and weeds, still debates over Christmas lights and pool guests. But there was also a quiet, shared understanding that the board's power had edges now, and that at least one homeowner in Unit 12C knew exactly where those edges were. New neighbors started asking different questions when they moved in. Not just when's trash day, but where can I find the bylaws? And what are my rights if there's a dispute? I began keeping a slim folder by the door with the complaint policy and the relevant Virginia statute printed out. When someone knocked, nervous about a letter they'd received, I'd hand it over and say, "Read these first, then decide how you want to respond." I never ran for the board. I didn't want to be in charge of paint colors or pool hours. My job, as I saw it, was the same one I had in the classroom: Teach people what the rules really say and what they absolutely do not say, no matter how official the letterhead looks. Neighbors started making little jokes when a new notice came out. Did legal sign off on this, Eleanor? And I'd smile and say, as long as it doesn't say, you are hereby required to hand over your life story, you're probably fine. Every once in a while, I still open the HOA incident folder on my laptop. Not out of spite, but as a reminder. The paper trail is neat, color-coded, complete, a case study I could hand to any first-year law student and say, this is what happens when a small authority forgets it's small. They wanted my records. What they got instead was a lesson in limits, precedents, not passwords, due process, not doorbell dumps. In that neighborhood, the war with the HOA was over. But for those who know the system from the inside, they know there's always another committee president somewhere who thinks they're above the law. Subscribe to the channel and watch the